He killed his entire family at age 10 and disappeared, until a couple in 2023 found him secretly living in their basement, disguised as their foster son. What happens next will leave you speechless. You must join our channel and hit subscribe, because only those who dare to unravel dark family secrets will do it before this story begins. It started with the whisper. Mitchell Langley sat upright in bed, heart suddenly racing, unsure if he had heard something or dreamt it. The room was still, cold. A faint glow from the hallway nightlight bled beneath the door, casting thin shadows across the hardwood floor. Next to him, Darren stirred but didn't wake. Mitchell listened. Silence. Then the whisper came again, closer this time, from within the room itself. He turned his head slowly. At the foot of the bed stood the boy, Caleb, barefoot, unmoving, his small frame shrouded in the oversized navy blue pajama top they'd given him, the sleeves drooping past his wrists. His dark hair hung in uneven strands over his eyes, and his head tilted slightly to the left, as if he were trying to study something that wasn't quite there. Mitchell's throat tightened. "How long have you been standing there?" he asked, voice low, careful not to startle him. Caleb blinked. His lips parted, but for a moment nothing came out. Then, in a voice like dry leaves brushing a window pane, he spoke. "Do you ever wonder if you brought something into your house?" he said. "That never planned to leave?" Mitchell froze as the scent hit him, sharp, unmistakable. Bleach, not faint, not lingering, but fresh and piercing, like the aftermath of a hospital cleanup. He stood just outside the bathroom, still barefoot from getting out of bed, and stared at the closed door. The overhead light glowed faintly from beneath the crack. He didn't remember cleaning anything. Neither had Darren, who was still asleep downstairs on the couch after grading papers late into the night. The house was quiet, wrapped in that strange stillness only found between midnight and dawn. Mitchell pushed the door open. The bathroom was immaculate, sink spotless, mirror gleaming, towels folded too neatly. Even the floor tiles, usually speckled with tiny flecks of dust or damp footprints, were bone dry. The smell stung his eyes now. He backed out slowly, the door creaking behind him. "Maybe he spilled something," Mitchell murmured to himself, trying to convince his own nerves. But it didn't feel accidental. It felt purposeful, controlled. Down the hall, Caleb's bedroom door stood ajar. He crept toward it, not bothering to knock. Inside, Caleb lay curled under his blankets, his silhouette small beneath the sheets. His breathing was steady, slow, peaceful. Mitchell exhaled. Maybe he was overthinking again. He'd been doing that more lately, reading too much into things, finding meaning where none existed. Still, he lingered a few moments longer. Back in the study, Mitchell sat at his desk and opened the laptop. He planned to email the agency, just to ask about cleaning habits, maybe dietary quirks, anything to ground this creeping uncertainty. But as the screen lit up, a cold shiver raced down his spine. His desktop was nearly empty. Dozens of folders he'd carefully maintained, client files, journal entries, old family videos were gone. Vanished. He blinked, leaned in, refreshed the view. Nothing changed. Mitchell opened the recycle bin. Empty. He clicked into the device history. Wiped. A quiet panic spread through his chest like ink in water. It wasn't just a glitch. These weren't files anyone else had access to. He hadn't left the laptop open. He hadn't given Caleb the password. Unless Caleb hadn't needed one. A soft creak came from upstairs. Mitchell straightened. His heart thudded against his ribs. He turned in the chair, half expecting Caleb to be standing there. But no one was. He stood, slowly, and walked out of the room. The hallway was empty. He padded down to the living room, hoping to wake Darren, but stopped when he saw Darren's keys resting on the coffee table. Except they hadn't been there this morning. Darren had torn the house apart looking for them before leaving with his spare set. Mitchell approached them warily, reaching out with 2 fingers. They were ice cold. He turned, moving to the kitchen, opened the freezer on a hunch. The air puffed out in a chilled wave. And there, nestled between frozen peas and an unopened box of waffles, sat Darren's keychain, identical to the one on the table. Mitchell shut the freezer, his mind spinning. 2 identical keychains? No, not identical. The one in the freezer had a broken flashlight attachment. The other didn't. He stood still for a long time. Later that evening, Mitchell sat in the study with Caleb's adoption file spread open across the desk. He flipped through the pages again and again, reading every line like it might rearrange itself into something that made sense. And then he saw it. The medical records ended 2 years ago. Not updated, not continued, just stopped. No explanation, no follow-up, not even a routine immunization since then. He picked up his phone and dialed the number listed for the caseworker. 3 rings, then a click. "Hello?" Mitchell asked, trying to keep his voice even. A pause. Then a woman's voice, hushed and mechanical. "There is no Caleb Morgan in our system." The line went dead. Mitchell stared at the phone, holding it like it might explain itself if he waited long enough. Then slowly he looked up. At the end of the hallway, barely lit by the dim glow of the staircase light, stood Caleb, barefoot, still, his head slightly tilted. His voice floated through the air like a breeze slipping through a crack in the wall. "Is something missing?" he asked softly. Mitchell froze when he saw the torn page on Caleb's desk. It was unmistakable, faded and yellowed at the edges, but still clear enough to make out the smiling faces of high school seniors. In the center, Darren's face stared back, younger, softer, framed by a mop of curls and a crooked smile. A thin red circle, drawn with deliberate care, marked his face. Mitchell felt his stomach tighten. "Where did you get this?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Caleb, sitting cross-legged on the carpet, didn't look up from the book he was flipping through. "You looked happier back then," he said casually, running a finger along the spine of the page as if tracing a memory. Mitchell stepped closer, snatching the yearbook fragment from the desk. He turned it over, checking for any writing, any clue. But the back was blank. The original yearbook, he remembered, was buried in a plastic storage bin in the attic, sealed with duct tape and stacked beneath boxes of Christmas ornaments. There was no reason, no possible reason, this page should be here. His pulse quickened. "Caleb," he said, softer now, kneeling beside the boy. "This is really important. Where did you find this page?" Caleb finally looked up. His eyes, always just a little too still, met Mitchell's without blinking. "I didn't find it," he whispered. "I remembered it." Mitchell's hand hovered over the zipper, heart hammering as if it already knew what it would find. The soft, rhythmic sound of Caleb's breathing filled the dimly lit room, slow and steady beneath the thick blanket pulled up to the boy's chin. Moonlight slipped through the cracked window, casting pale lines across the wooden floor. Mitchell knelt beside the bed, careful not to let the floorboards creak beneath his knees. The backpack was tucked neatly under the desk, just where Caleb always left it. It looked so ordinary. Canvas blue, a stitched-on patch peeling at the corner. He told himself it was just to ease his mind, just to look, just to see. The zipper moved slowly, teeth opening like a whisper. The first thing he saw was a worn sweatshirt and a school notebook. Innocent enough. But beneath that, something caught the moonlight, a flash of metal. Mitchell froze. He reached in and pulled out a hunting knife wrapped in a scrap of an old towel. The blade was long, too clean, and the handle was worn, as if it had been held many times before. His throat tightened. Nestled beneath it was a photo, partially burned, edges curled from flame. A smiling man and woman, 2 teenage boys, and a smaller child who looked far too familiar. His eyes were shadowed, but the shape of his jaw, the set of his mouth, they mirrored Caleb's. Beneath the photo were newspaper clippings folded with care. Mitchell opened the first one with trembling fingers. Family of 5 found slain in basement, boy missing after grisly murder, authorities still searching for James Elridge. Age 10. Each headline pounded in his skull like a drumbeat. He read them again and again, hoping the words would rearrange themselves, mean something else, anything else. But there was no mistake. The boy in the photograph, the name in the headline, the age, the eyes. James Elridge, not Caleb Morgan. A sharp rustle broke the silence. Mitchell's eyes snapped up. Caleb had stirred in his bed. His head turned slowly, like it weighed more than it should. The boy sat up without blinking, eyes already open, dark and shining in the moonlight. "Looking for something, Dad?" he asked. The voice was even, calm, neither curious nor angry, just observant. Mitchell froze, the article still clutched in his hand. He stood slowly, forcing his voice steady. "I was just checking the temperature. It's cold tonight." Caleb tilted his head slightly to the side. "It's going to get colder," he said, his tone soft but certain. "It always does, before the next part." Mitchell's stomach twisted. The boy lay back down without another word, pulling the blanket to his chin as if nothing had happened. Mitchell backed out of the room, careful not to run, though every nerve screamed at him to move faster. He returned the clippings to the bag with shaking hands, wiped the blade of the knife and zipped it shut. Once outside the room, he closed the door gently and leaned against the wall, breathing hard. His skin felt clammy, his heartbeat erratic. He slid down until he was crouched on the hallway floor, staring at nothing. How long had that backpack been sitting under the desk? How long had they been sleeping under the same roof as this boy, or whatever he was? In the morning, he made coffee with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. Darren entered the kitchen whistling, already dressed for work, and poured himself a mug like it was any other day. "I need to talk to you," Mitchell said. Darren raised a brow. "About?" Mitchell hesitated, unsure how to form the words. "I went into Caleb's room last night. I found things, Darren. Not normal things. A knife. Articles about a family that was murdered. A missing child named James Elridge." Darren sipped his coffee and smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Mitch, you've been running on fumes lately. Between work and the adjustment, it's not surprising you're feeling off." "I'm serious," Mitchell snapped. "This isn't in your head stuff. These are real things. I saw them with my own eyes." Darren sighed, setting his mug down. "You've been stressed before and thought you saw things. You remember the camping trip, right? You thought there was a bear in the tent, and it turned out to be a backpack. That's not what this is." "You said it yourself," Darren continued gently. "The boy's been through a lot. Maybe he's just collecting things, processing. Kids do strange things when they don't know how to talk." Mitchell stared at his husband, rage and fear battling inside him. "He knew I was in his room, Darren. He sat up like he'd been waiting for me, and he said something strange. Something rehearsed." Darren's smile faded slightly, but he didn't respond. Mitchell didn't argue further. There was no point, not until he had something undeniable. Something Darren could hold in his hands and not laugh off. Later that afternoon, Darren left for work as usual. Mitchell watched him pull out of the driveway from the upstairs window. His eyes scanned the yard and froze. Out in the garden, near the back fence, Caleb stood barefoot in the soil, his jeans damp with morning dew. He held a rusted trowel in one hand, the other cupped around something unseen. His head was bowed, shoulders still, as he dug, methodically, carefully, into the earth. Mitchell stared at the boy, heart sinking, unable to look away. Caleb was digging. Mitchell's hand trembled as he shut the microwave door. Inside, one of his hidden audio recorders, melted, warped beyond recognition, sat like a quiet warning. Its plastic casing had bubbled and split, the metal interior blackened. He hadn't told anyone about that device. He'd installed it beneath the living room cabinet 2 nights ago, angled toward the couch where Caleb often sat alone. Now it was gone.
No scorch marks.
No smoke alarm, just silence. He stood motionless in the kitchen, the hum of the refrigerator suddenly too loud. From the hallway, Caleb's soft humming drifted into the room. A broken, wandering tune with no rhythm or end. Mitchell couldn't tell if the melody was cheerful or mocking. It just floated, steady and strange, like a lullaby sung by someone who'd never learned what comfort meant. Mitchell tightened his grip on the counter's edge. Stay calm. Stay normal. That had become his mantra over the last 3 days. ever since he found the knife and those articles buried deep inside Caleb's backpack. He had taken photos, scanning each headline, each faded image. Family of 5 found slain in basement. Authorities still searching for James Elridge. He didn't sleep that night. He copied everything, printed backups, and hid the originals in the lining of his briefcase. It wasn't enough. Nothing ever felt like enough. And through it all, Caleb changed, subtly but unmistakably. He was warmer with Darren now, almost clingy. He'd sidle up beside him on the couch, head resting on Darren's arm, eyes closed like a content pet. He brought Darren coffee in the mornings, folded laundry without being asked, even left a hand-drawn picture on his pillow. A stick-figure family, 3 people standing beneath a sun with crooked rays. Darren had laughed softly when he found it. "He's coming around," he told Mitchell, holding the drawing like a fragile miracle. But Mitchell saw the detail Darren didn't. The smallest figure in the picture wasn't holding hands with anyone. It stood apart, watching. He spent hours pretending to work from home while watching Caleb's movements. The boy never caused trouble outright. He did his homework, brushed his teeth, ate his meals quietly. But there were moments, brief flashes, when his stillness felt unnatural. Too still, like he was listening for something just beyond the walls. Mitchell needed help. That night, after Darren had gone to bed and Caleb was tucked into his room, he sat at his desk and pulled out the oldest article, the one that mentioned Detective Royce Henley. The name was scrawled in faded ink at the bottom of a photocopy, nearly unreadable. Mitchell dialed the number. 3 rings, then 4. Voicemail. He left no message. Just sat there, the receiver still pressed to his ear, listening to static until the line clicked dead. His stomach twisted. He had no plan B. Not yet. Down the hall, the humming stopped. Mitchell stiffened. Slowly, he turned off the desk lamp and stood. The hallway beyond his door was swallowed in darkness. Only the faint light from the bathroom nightlight casting a dull glow across the floor. He stepped out, careful to avoid the floorboard that creaked. As he neared the living room, a voice whispered out of the darkness. "They all thought I was normal too." The words came from the far corner, low, gentle, almost bored. Mitchell's blood ran cold. He flicked on the light. The room was empty. No Caleb. No sound. Just the weight of the sentence still hanging in the air like smoke. Mitchell returned to his room and locked the door, pressing the bolt in with a trembling thumb. He sat on the edge of his bed, hands clasped together, sweat beading on his forehead. It wasn't just fear anymore. It was something heavier, a realization that the boundaries between safety and danger had blurred, and no one else in the house seemed to notice. The next morning, Darren was chipper, packing lunches and humming to himself. Caleb sat at the breakfast table, spooning cereal without looking up. Mitchell forced a smile, handed Darren his keys, and kissed him goodbye. He waited until the front door closed and the car engine faded down the street. Then he made his move. From beneath the bathroom sink, he retrieved the second recorder, the one he'd placed inside the vent. Still intact. Still functional. He rewound it and plugged it into his laptop, adjusting the volume knob until it clicked. Nothing. Just silence. Then a click. A faint sound, barely a breath, then static. He leaned closer. Then, abruptly, the file cut to black. Every folder on his laptop blinked, then vanished. Mitchell stared at the screen in horror. His desktop, once cluttered with files and backups, was now bare. Empty. Except for one image. A photo. He double-clicked. The screen filled with a still frame, his own bedroom, dimly lit by the hallway light. In the center, lying in bed, were 2 figures. Mitchell and Darren, asleep. And standing at the foot of the bed was Caleb, smiling. Mitchell's breath hitched. He checked the timestamp in the bottom corner. 3:16 a.m. He turned slowly, his gaze flicking toward the hallway beyond his cracked bedroom door. The air felt heavier now, every sound sharper, his own heartbeat deafening in his ears. He reached for his phone, but it was gone. In the silence, he could almost hear the hum starting again. When he asked Caleb if he knew what happened, the boy smiled and replied, "Sometimes, houses fix themselves. Mitchell's hands trembled as he held the phone to his ear, pacing the kitchen in tight, uneven circles. The call had finally connected after days of static, voicemails, and silence. On the other end, a graveled voice exhaled like the weight of a decade. "Detective Henley?" Mitchell asked, voice taut. "It's about the boy, the one we took in. The one calling himself Caleb Morgan." There was no immediate answer, just a faint crackle. Then, a weary sigh. "You need to leave." The words hit Mitchell like ice water. "What? He's still 10, right?" Henley's tone dropped to a whisper, like he was speaking from under a blanket or inside a closet. "That's what he does. He stays 10. Mitchell stopped pacing. The refrigerator hummed behind him. The rain outside tapped the kitchen window like fingers. "What are you talking about?" Mitchell demanded. "What do you mean, he stays 10? There was a long pause. Mitchell imagined Henley staring at a wall, dragging a hand down his face, deciding whether to say more. "He vanished 12 years ago," Henley finally said. "No birth certificate, no family, no school records past the first one. And the file they sent you? That's not a foster file. It's bait." "Bait for what?" Mitchell whispered, but the line had already gone dead. Mitchell stood frozen in the kitchen, the phone still pressed to his cheek. His pulse drummed in his ears, too loud, too fast. He lowered the phone slowly, like it might explode, and looked down the hallway toward the basement door. Caleb had been spending a lot of time down there. The basement light was off. As he descended the steps, Mitchell's shoes creaked against the wood. The air grew cooler with each step, damp with the scent of soil and mildew. A low bulb buzzed to life overhead when he pulled the chain. Everything looked as it had. Boxes labeled Christmas, old books, and camping gear. But one stack, tucked in the corner behind the water heater, was off-center. Too clean. Mitchell crouched, moving the boxes aside. His fingers brushed cool drywall. But just beyond that, a gap. He froze. The panel had been pried away. Not broken. Removed carefully, deliberately. Inside, there was a hollow space behind the wall, narrow, dark, and barely wide enough for a child to crawl through. Mitchell reached for his phone light and aimed it inside. The beam revealed scratches on the wooden paneling, like claw marks. Dozens of them. Names etched with nails or the edge of a metal spoon. Some were faded, buried beneath others. Each name a ghost. And at the very bottom, in fresh, uneven carving, "James Elridge, still here." Mitchell staggered backward and sat hard on the concrete floor. His breath came shallow. The light from the bulb flickered slightly, casting jerking shadows across the wall. He stared at the name until his eyes burned. There was no Caleb Morgan. He wasn't breathing properly as he climbed the stairs again, gripping the railing as though it might anchor him back to sanity. His shirt stuck to his back with sweat. He burst into the living room and found Darren sitting on the couch, flipping through a book. "Darren," Mitchell said, voice hoarse. "We need to talk." Darren looked up slowly. "You okay?" "No," Mitchell shook his head, trying to stay steady. "I found something in the basement, behind the boxes, behind the wall." He didn't expect Darren to understand. But he didn't expect indifference either. Instead, Darren leaned forward, setting the book on the coffee table. "What kind of something?" "A space," Mitchell said, "like a crawl space, with names scratched into the walls." One of them said, "James Elridge." It was fresh. Darren stared. Then, to Mitchell's shock, his brow furrowed not with panic, but with thoughtfulness. "You don't think?" Darren said slowly. "Maybe he's just trying to survive?" Mitchell took a step back. "What?" Darren stood, running a hand through his hair. "I mean, what if this is how he copes? What if this is the only way he knows how to live?" Mitchell's skin prickled. "Darren, you're not listening. He's not who we thought he was. That file we got? Henley said it's fake. There's no Caleb Morgan. He doesn't age. He's not a child, Darren." Darren's eyes flickered toward the hallway. "He eats. He sleeps. He calls me Dad." Mitchell stared at his husband, a rising wave of disbelief clawing through his chest. "Darren," he said slowly, quietly, What if we're the ones he's surviving? Darren stood by the window, staring out into the gray morning without seeing anything. His coffee sat untouched on the table behind him, going cold. Mitchell watched him from across the room, his arms folded tightly against his chest. Something in Darren's posture, shoulders slightly hunched, hand twitching at his side, set off alarms. The man looked hollow, like he was present but no longer fully there. "Did you sleep?" Mitchell asked, voice low. Darren blinked, turned slowly. "Some." The answer wasn't convincing. His eyes were glassy, ringed with dark circles, and his shirt was buttoned wrong, one side hanging lower than the other. He didn't fix it. Mitchell took a cautious step closer. "You've been different since we talked." Darren offered a faint, almost dreamy smile. "It's just a lot, Mitch. That's all. Let's not make this bigger than it is." But it already was big. Too big to ignore. Later that day, Mitchell lay in bed pretending to sleep as Caleb wandered past the guest room. The boy's bare feet made no sound on the wood floor, but Mitchell had come to recognize the rhythm, carefully placed steps, like someone avoiding creaky boards. Once he was sure Caleb was downstairs, Mitchell rose, went to the hallway closet, and retrieved the small camera he'd hidden inside a carbon monoxide detector. He'd bought it weeks ago but hadn't dared to use it until now. Something about Caleb's voice that morning, so certain, so detached, had driven him past the point of waiting. He installed the device quickly, screwing it into the wall near the basement door. Caleb always lingered there, always paused with a hand on the knob like he was listening for something beneath. Mitchell returned to his room and waited. That night, the house was so quiet that even the ice shifting in the freezer sounded unnatural. Mitchell lay still, blinking at the ceiling, counting each tick of the wall clock. At exactly 2:14 a.m., he heard the sound, slow, deliberate footsteps just outside his door. He held his breath. They passed without pause. A minute later, he heard the stairs creak. By morning, Mitchell rushed to his laptop and opened the footage. The hallway came to life in grainy black and white. Caleb stepped into frame, his back to the camera. He took a single step backward, then another, and another. He continued for nearly 20 minutes, gliding in reverse like a puppet with invisible strings, until he stood flush against the basement door. His head tilted slightly to the right. He leaned forward, nose nearly touching the wood, and whispered. Mitchell turned the volume all the way up. Nothing but static. Then, faintly, something beneath it. A phrase that made his spine lock tight. "Not yet. They still love me." He shot back from the screen, stomach rolling. His hands hovered over the keyboard, unsure what to do first. Call someone? Send the file? Copy it? He chose the last option, dragged the video into a separate folder, labeled it under a fake name, and reached for his backup drive. But the screen blinked. The folder vanished. All the files vanished. Every photo, every note, every recording from the last few weeks disappeared in an instant. "No, no, no," Mitchell muttered, pounding the keyboard. He opened the video player again, hoping it had autosaved somewhere. Nothing. Just one image left in the media folder. One. He clicked it. The photo filled the screen slowly, like something pulling itself together from underwater. It showed Mitchell and Darren, asleep in their bed, faces half buried in their pillows. Caleb stood between them, arms at his sides, head slightly bowed, but his eyes stared straight into the camera, and his mouth was curled into a smile too wide for comfort. Mitchell froze. He checked the timestamp at the bottom corner. 3:16 a.m. They had been asleep. If that moment sent chills down your spine and made your heart race, don't stay silent. Subscribe and become a member, because some truths demand to be exposed. Mitchell gripped the edge of the bathroom sink, his knuckles white as porcelain. His reflection looked foreign, eyes bloodshot, jaw clenched, breath coming in short, sharp bursts. He had just told Darren they needed to leave. Now, not in a week, not after one more conversation with the agency, not after Caleb settled down. Now, but Darren didn't move. He stood near the hallway window, watching the rain tap against the glass like it had something to say. His arms hung limp at his sides, fingers twitching occasionally, as if reaching for a thought he couldn't quite grab. "You don't get it, Mitch?" he said finally, voice low, almost dreamy. "He chose us. He could have gone anywhere, but he came here. That has to mean something." Mitchell turned to him, the weight of disbelief crashing into his chest. "You're talking like he's a stray dog, Darren. He's not lost. He's hiding." For a moment, Darren's face flickered, some remnant of the man Mitchell had built a life with, but it vanished, swallowed by that strange calm that had settled over him ever since Caleb's presence deepened in their home like mold under wallpaper. Mitchell didn't reply. He couldn't. His voice would betray too much fear. Instead, he turned and quietly stepped into the bedroom, opened the closet, and pulled down the old hiking backpack. He packed fast, essentials only. His laptop, charger, passport, the photos he had printed from Caleb's file. The hunting knife he found weeks ago. A flashlight. He moved like a man escaping a fire that hadn't quite broken into flames yet. Downstairs, the house creaked in the rain. The walls seemed to listen. He zipped the bag slowly, trying not to make a sound, then crept down the hallway. Each step on the wooden floor groaned just enough to make his breath catch. At the top of the stairs, he paused, listening. Nothing but the sound of wind pushing against the siding. Good. Maybe Darren had gone to bed. Maybe Caleb was in his room, staring at his ceiling again like he was reading messages no one else could see. Mitchell stepped down the first stair, then the second. By the third, a faint sound floated up, purring, calm, rhythmic. He froze. As he rounded the landing, his foot hit the cold tile of the lower hallway and he looked up, and there he was. Caleb sat at the bottom of the staircase, cross-legged, gently stroking the cat that had once belonged only to Mitchell. The boy's eyes didn't meet his. They stared off toward the front door, expressionless. "Where are you going?" Caleb asked softly without looking up. Mitchell's throat tightened. I just needed air." "You never finish stories, do you?" Caleb said, still petting the cat. His fingers moved slowly, deliberately, as if counting heartbeats. "Always getting to the good part, then leaving." Mitchell instinctively clutched the strap of his bag tighter. "It's late, Caleb. You should be in bed." The boy finally looked up. His eyes gleamed, not in malice but in something worse, knowing. He reached into his lap and lifted something carefully. Mitchell's phone, cracked clean across the center. Caleb held it like a gift. "The man on the phone isn't coming," he said, his tone so even it felt rehearsed. "He never does. He says that every time." Mitchell stared at the shattered screen. His heart dropped into his stomach. "What do you mean every time?" he whispered. But Caleb didn't answer. He rose with cat-like smoothness, his eyes never leaving Mitchell's. As he passed, he brushed close, too close, and whispered, "You pack faster now, though. That's better." Then he padded upstairs, leaving behind only the fading echo of his footsteps and the warm indent where the cat still lay. Mitchell stood frozen, hand trembling on the stair railing. The walls seemed to lean in around him. His thoughts scattered, incoherent. He wanted to scream, to run, to wake up. The overhead kitchen light clicked on. "Mitchell?" came Darren's voice from the other room, casual and welcoming, like nothing in the world was wrong. "Come back upstairs. We're family now." And from the way he said it, Mitchell realized he wasn't talking about Caleb, he was talking like him. Mitchell stood motionless outside the basement door, fingers grazing the cool surface of the new padlock that hadn't been there the day before. The metal gleamed under the hallway light, new, unscuffed, installed cleanly into the wooden frame. His heart thudded hard in his chest. The lock was a message, not from Caleb, from Darren. He ran his hand over the edge of the doorframe, checking for signs of the old latch. It was gone, replaced, quietly, without conversation. Darren hadn't mentioned it last night, nor that morning over breakfast. But Mitchell had felt something change, small things at first. The way Darren paused in conversation now, as if listening to a second voice only he could hear. How he lingered by Caleb's door before bed, murmuring goodnight in a tone more tender than Mitchell had ever heard from him. He used to be skeptical, cautious, almost guarded around the boy. Now he smiled too much. Mitchell stepped away, pulse quickening, and found Darren in the kitchen, humming softly as he flipped pancakes. Caleb sat at the island counter, swinging his legs beneath the stool, fork tapping his plate. "Why is there a new lock on the basement?" Mitchell asked, his voice sharp. Darren glanced up, unfazed. "We all have things we need to keep safe." Mitchell's stomach twisted. Safe from what? Darren turned off the stove. From accidents. From misinterpretation. Mitchell caught the flicker in Caleb's eyes. A glance exchanged between them. Too fast, too practiced. He didn't say another word. Not then. That night, after the dishes were washed and Darren had gone to bed early with a lingering headache, Mitchell waited. He sat in the darkened hallway outside Caleb's room, listening to the soft shuffle of socks against carpet as the boy moved around. At 10:34 p.m., the light under the door finally dimmed. Silence. He pushed the door open slowly. Caleb was seated at the dining table. Not his room, hands folded. A half-finished glass of milk beside him. He was already watching the door, as if he'd known Mitchell would come. Mitchell swallowed hard. "Who are you really?" he asked. Caleb looked up, chewing a bite of bread slowly, almost deliberately, like the words themselves could wait. He didn't flinch, didn't blink. "I'm the boy you wanted," he said evenly. "You just didn't know it yet." The calmness in his voice chilled Mitchell more than anger would have. He stepped closer. "Don't play with me. I know about the Elridge family. The ones in that article. The ones who—" He stopped himself, the words caught behind his teeth. Caleb blinked, serene. "They made me up, like everything else." Mitchell's brow furrowed. "That's not true. I've seen the clippings. I've seen—" "Stories," Caleb interrupted, brushing crumbs from his lap. "People are so easy to believe in ghosts. But they never check the attic." Mitchell stiffened. "You mean basement?" Caleb smiled, and this time it reached his eyes, curling at the edges with something that didn't belong on a 10-year-old's face. "No," he said softly. "Attic." Heart racing, Mitchell climbed to the attic for the first time in years. The narrow pull-down ladder groaned beneath his weight, each step a slow creak that seemed to echo through the quiet house. Dust floated thick in the air, stirred by his movement, catching the faint light from a cracked window at the far end like flecks of ash. He coughed into his sleeve and raised a hand to shield his eyes. The temperature dropped noticeably as he reached the top, the air colder and still, as if it hadn't been disturbed in decades. The attic was exactly as he remembered. Boxes labeled in fading marker, plastic bins of holiday decorations, and a rocking chair half-covered in a moth-eaten blanket. Cobwebs strung across beams like forgotten warning signs. A broken picture frame lay beside an overturned lamp. He stepped carefully, floorboards creaking beneath his socks, his breath just barely visible in the dim light. His flashlight beam cut across the space, revealing nothing more than neglect and dust. Then he saw it. A square outline in the floorboards, small, about 2 feet wide. The wood around it looked newer than the rest, the seams too sharp, too deliberate. Mitchell crouched slowly, heart pounding against his ribs, and ran his fingers along the edges. It wasn't nailed down, just fitted snugly into place. A knot formed in his throat. He hesitated, then pried the panel free. Cold air rushed upward, smelling faintly of mildew and something far less natural, something sweet and rotten. A narrow ladder descended into a cavity between the attic floor and the ceiling below, a space that shouldn't have existed. Mitchell's flashlight trembled in his grip as he angled it downward. The beam caught the glint of something metallic and the faded curve of a mattress below. He climbed down slowly, the ladder groaning with each movement. The space was cramped. He had to crouch. The ceiling above was low and slanted, pressing down like a lid. Yellowed wallpaper peeled from the walls in curling strips, revealing mold-blackened boards beneath. A small, stained mattress lay against one side of the room, its edges frayed and caved in. Beside it sat a stuffed bear, One button I missing, its fabric matted with grime. A plastic spoon rested on the floor, its surface streaked with something dark red, hardened like old wax. The air was heavy with decay. Mitchell covered his nose, but it barely helped. The smell crawled into his lungs, damp wood, mold, and something worse. Something that had once breathed, once moved, and had been left too long in silence. He tried not to gag. He turned to leave, and stopped cold. There, written in thick black marker on the inside of the trapdoor, were the words, "He stayed 10 so you'd never look here." Mitchell's breath caught in his throat. His legs threatened to give way beneath him. He stared, unable to move, unable to think. Just below the first sentence, another line was scrawled hastily, the handwriting jagged and uneven, as if written in a rush. Mitchell Langley, next. Mitchell stumbled out of the attic, drenched in sweat, every nerve screaming. His legs trembled beneath him, the wooden floorboards groaning underfoot as he gripped the stairwell for balance. Dust clung to his skin. The air felt too thin, too warm, like something had been breathing in the darkness just behind him. As he descended the stairs, the house shifted, quiet, but aware. He froze when he heard it. The slam of the front door, sharp and final. Caleb had left, or was pretending to. He rushed into the living room, eyes wild, and found Darren sitting cross-legged on the couch, a book resting unopened on his lap. The television played some low documentary neither of them had turned on. Darren didn't look surprised to see him, didn't even flinch at Mitchell's disheveled state. "I found it," Mitchell gasped. "The attic, there's a hidden room, a trapdoor under the boards. It's not just storage. It's a place someone lived in." Darren looked up slowly. His face was calm, but something behind his eyes had dimmed, as if a light had been turned off for good. "Then maybe it's good we gave him the attic," he said quietly. "You saw the room. He needs space." Mitchell froze. "Darren, listen to yourself. That wasn't a room. That was a tomb." His voice cracked at the last word, throat tightening with panic. Darren smiled, but it wasn't warm. It was too still, too rehearsed. "You don't bury what's still alive, Mitchell. You make it comfortable." Mitchell felt his stomach twist. He took a step back, heart pounding. Darren's words hung in the air like smoke, curling around the corners of the room. Something about him was wrong. Not angry, not scared, just surrendered. "I'm not staying here tonight," Mitchell said, voice low. He backed toward the hallway, every hair on his neck standing upright. Darren didn't follow. He just returned his gaze to the television as though none of it mattered. In the guest room, Mitchell shoved a chair under the knob and locked the door twice. He slid down against the wall, heart still hammering, and buried his face in his hands. His shirt clung to him with sweat. The ceiling fan buzzed softly overhead, an annoying reminder of normalcy in a house that had stopped feeling safe. What had Darren meant? You make it comfortable. Comfortable for what? Or who? At 2:37 a.m., the old floorboards outside creaked once. Then again. A slow, deliberate rhythm, 1 foot at a time. Mitchell sat up straight, eyes locked on the doorknob. The shadows under it thickened, and then came the knock. Soft, controlled. "Mitchell," Caleb's voice whispered. It was too close, too clear. "You're right. This house is full of ghosts. But they're not mine." Mitchell didn't move. He didn't breathe. A trickle of sweat ran down his spine. The knock came again, slower this time. Then again. 5 minutes passed. Maybe more. Then silence. Mitchell stayed in that room until the sun crept in through the slats of the blinds. The silence outside unnerved him more than any footsteps. When he finally emerged, the house was still. Downstairs, the cereal box was open on the table. A bowl clinked softly as a spoon stirred. Darren was gone. Mitchell stood at the foot of the stairs, surveying the living room. Darren's phone was on the coffee table. His keys sat untouched in the bowl by the door. His wallet rested atop a folded jacket on the armrest. Caleb was already eating when Mitchell entered the kitchen. Milk dribbled down his chin. He didn't look up right away. When he did, It was with a smile so casual it chilled the room. He didn't like upstairs anymore, he said. So he went under. Mitchell slammed the car door harder than he intended, his breath forming small clouds in the crisp air as he stormed up the courthouse steps. The local records office was tucked behind the main building, a squat structure with peeling paint and a flickering open sign that buzzed faintly in the still morning. He didn't bother signing the visitor's log or pretending to be calm. His hands were shaking, adrenaline humming beneath his skin. Inside, the clerk behind the counter barely looked up, his gray beard twitching as he typed on a yellowing keyboard. "I need files," Mitchell said, the urgency in his voice too sharp to ignore. "Caleb Morgan and James Elridge. Anything you have." The man frowned, squinting over his glasses. "You got a court order?" "No, but I'll pay. Please, just look." Mitchell pulled out his wallet and slid 2 20s across the counter, the bills trembling slightly between his fingers. The clerk stared at the money, then at Mitchell's eyes, sunken, wild, desperate. After a pause that felt like a lifetime, the clerk sighed and shuffled toward the back room. "Wait here." Mitchell's heart thudded as he stood alone in the dim office, the sound of filing cabinets and dragging boxes echoing faintly. A minute later, the man returned with a battered manila folder, his expression unreadable. He placed it gently on the counter, then leaned in close. "You didn't get this here. Understand?" Mitchell nodded, wordless. The folder was warm from the clerk's hands. He opened it slowly, breath catching as the first image hit him. Charred wood, blackened beams, the skeletal remains of what once was a farmhouse. The photos were grainy but unmistakable. 5 figures laid out in plastic sheeting, one of them clearly smaller than the others. The label scrawled across the top read Claridge County, Fire Incident Report. A note in the margin, faded but legible, said, "James Elridge, presumed missing, not recovered." Mitchell flipped to the next page, and his skin prickled. A clinical evaluation, typewritten in sharp font, bore a chilling summary. Subject demonstrates advanced mimicry. Lacks standard emotional response. Physical age unchanged. 6 recorded years with no physiological development. No known illness. Unexplained stasis. He scanned further, eyes wide. Recommendation: terminate program. Relocate subject. Do not inform public. Further observation poses risk. Mitchell stared at the final line, bolded and underlined in red ink. This file is confidential. Destroy upon reading. His fingers twitched. The folder felt heavier than it should, as if soaked in something invisible, as if history itself didn't want it to be seen. He stuffed the contents inside his coat and fled the building, not looking back. The drive home blurred past. Streetlights buzzed. Houses stood in eerie stillness. The wind howled low through the trees like it was warning him. When he pulled into the driveway, the porch light was off. That was wrong. Darren always left it on. Mitchell stepped out, every muscle taut. The silence was different now, not the calm kind, but the waiting kind. Inside, the house felt colder than it should. Shadows clung to the corners like cobwebs. "Darren?" he called, voice hoarse. No answer. He moved room to room, each one colder than the last. The television was off, the books untouched. A mug of tea still sat on the side table, steamless. He turned toward the basement door. It was open. Mitchell's breath hitched as he stepped onto the creaking stairs. The air down there felt damp, pressed tight against his lungs. The smell hit him halfway down, earth, raw and freshly turned, and something else beneath it, metallic, unsettling. When he reached the bottom, his eyes adjusted to the gloom. A soft glow came from a bare bulb swinging overhead. His gaze followed the arc of disturbed soil and landed on a shallow pit in the corner, dug deep into the earth. At its edge sat a familiar pair of brown leather shoes, Darren's. Just placed there. Not discarded. Not tossed. Placed. There was no body. "Darren?" he whispered, voice trembling now, not with fear, but with the terror of realization. "Darren, where are you?" A soft shuffle answered him from behind. Mitchell turned, slowly. Caleb stood in the shadows, one hand resting against the stone wall. His face was calm, smooth, ageless. His eyes reflected the bare bulb like glass. When he spoke, his voice was almost tender. You should have left when the others did, but you stayed. So now you see me. Mitchell stumbled backward, his heel catching the edge of the freshly dug pit in the basement. The loose earth crumbled under his weight, and he nearly lost his footing. His chest heaved. Sweat clung to his back despite the damp chill in the air. The shovel, still stuck upright in the dirt, looked too clean, too deliberate. And then Caleb stepped forward, into the light that poured weakly from the overhead bulb. There was no fury in the boy's face, no sneer, no raised voice or clenched fists. Instead, his expression carried something far more chilling. Recognition. A quiet calm, like someone watching an old film they'd memorized line by line. They always dig the hole, Caleb said, voice barely louder than a whisper. His bare feet made no sound on the concrete. But they never fill it. Mitchell's hands trembled as he raised the folder from the records office. His fingers were smudged with dirt, but he gripped the documents like a shield. I know what you are, he said, his voice shaking. You're not a child, you're something pretending to be one. You've done this before. Caleb tilted his head, lips parting in the faintest smile. Is that what you think this is about? Pretending? He took a step forward. Then another. Mitchell's breath caught in his throat as he moved reflexively back, bumping against the cold stone wall. The basement seemed smaller now, shrinking with each second. You're not afraid of me because I hurt people, Caleb continued, his eyes dark and steady. You're afraid because deep down you believed I was real, that I could belong to you, that I wanted to. Mitchell felt the folder sag in his grip. He tried to speak, to protest, but his throat locked up. His mind scrambled through memories. Those first quiet days, Caleb's small voice asking for stories, the way he sat by the window as if waiting. Were those lies? Or had he made them real just by believing? No, Mitchell rasped, voice cracking. No, I didn't want this. But you let it happen, Caleb said softly. You gave me a name, a room, a story. His footsteps echoed gently as he closed the distance. That makes you part of this now. Mitchell turned, heart hammering, and bolted toward the stairs. But something cold seized his wrist, Caleb's grip impossibly strong. Mitchell slipped, hitting the ground hard. The folder scattered, papers fluttering like pale moths in the gloom. Caleb stood over him, expression unreadable. It's not about hurting, he whispered. It's about staying. And you stayed. Mitchell struggled, clawing at the concrete floor. His shoulder screamed in pain as he twisted, trying to break free. But Caleb's hand remained firm, holding him with the ease of someone older, stronger, something older. I won't be part of this, Mitchell hissed. I won't let you. Caleb knelt slowly, the movement fluid and eerie. He leaned in close, the air around him growing colder. Mitchell could see every detail now, the boy's dark lashes, the almost imperceptible lines at the corners of his eyes, the quiet understanding behind them. You already are, Caleb whispered. Then he reached forward and placed one finger gently over Mitchell's lips. Shoo, he said. His voice was soft, kind, almost loving. Let the house decide who stays. The knock came at precisely 10:04 a.m. The boy heard it first. He stood in the hallway, motionless for a moment, as if waiting for the sound to come again. It did, 3 soft raps against the front door. Caleb turned the knob with slow, deliberate fingers and opened the door just wide enough to let the fog-drenched morning spill in. A woman in a beige coat stood on the porch, clipboard tucked under one arm, her breath clouding in the cold. Good morning. Is this the Langley residence? Caleb blinked at her, then smiled the way he'd practiced in the mirror. Yes, ma'am. They're not home right now. They moved. To Europe. The social worker hesitated. Europe? They left me with Mr. Sutton, Caleb said brightly, pushing the door open farther. He's their friend. He's just out running errands. Oh, she replied, a touch of surprise slipping into her voice. She looked past him into the house, neat, sunlit, quiet. I'm here for a welfare follow-up. The agency hadn't received your case update in a while. Caleb tilted his head thoughtfully. That's strange. They said everything was fine. But you can come in if you want. I just made cookies. He stepped aside with a practiced sweep of his hand. She hesitated, eyes flicking from his small frame to the hallway behind him. Then slowly she stepped in. The house smelled like lemon polish and vanilla. Soft music played from a speaker in the living room, some gentle classical piece that seemed slightly too loud, as if meant to mask something else. The floorboards didn't creak under the social worker's heels. She noticed that right away. Most houses this old had a voice, a memory in every groan of the wood, but this one was silent. You seem very mature, she said with a smile. How old are you again, Caleb? 10, he answered without missing a beat. Still 10? She asked casually, noting the date on her form. Still 10, he echoed, with a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. It's a good age. She scribbled something on her clipboard and followed him into the kitchen, where a plate of chocolate chip cookies sat on the counter. They were too perfect, uniform shape, even spacing, just the right browning at the edges. She picked one up and took a cautious bite. Warm, fresh, delicious. You made these yourself? Yes, Mr. Sutton taught me, he said, folding his hands behind his back. He says keeping a clean house and cooking well are good habits, especially for boys like me. And where is Mr. Sutton today? She asked, glancing up. Caleb's smile widened. Hardware store. We had a leaky pipe. She nodded again, jotting more notes. The kitchen was spotless. No dishes in the sink. No clutter. The counters gleamed under the sunlight. It all felt prepared. I'll just take a quick look around, she said. Is that okay? Of course, Caleb said, gesturing down the hallway. You can start upstairs. My room's the second door. She moved slowly, scanning as she went. Family photos lined the stairwell, Darren and Mitchell, always with warm eyes and quiet grins, arms around each other, or beside the boy. He looked the same in every frame, always 10, always still, always staring directly into the lens. The bedroom looked lived in. A small desk, a neat bookshelf, a bed with a dinosaur comforter. She ran her fingers along the spine of one of the books. No dust. Is this your room? Yes, Caleb said from the doorway. You keep it tidy. Mr. Sutton says a tidy space means a tidy mind. She smiled politely and made a final note before descending the stairs again. Caleb waited by the front door, hands clasped. Well, she said, you seem well adjusted. I'll be filing a follow-up report, and someone will check in again next month. But for now, you're doing great, Caleb. He nodded. Thank you for coming. She stepped outside and turned once more. Tell Mr. Sutton I stopped by. I will, he said. He'll be happy. The door closed behind her with a gentle click. Inside, the house exhaled. The music stopped. Caleb stood still for a moment, then turned and walked down the hallway toward the basement door. The lock clicked open with ease. He descended slowly, step by step, into the cold, still air below. The floor was smooth concrete, new pale gray. Along the far wall, a row of paint cans sat undisturbed. Caleb walked past them and knelt by the center of the floor. He placed his small hand flat against the concrete, the way someone might touch a gravestone. Below his palm, Mitchell's shattered phone, the scorched edges of a manila folder, and a pair of eyeglasses with one cracked lens. Upstairs, a breeze slipped through the open attic window. The bear hadn't moved. In the dim attic light, the tally marks were still visible, neatly carved, painfully counted. A new one had been added last week. Beneath it, in scrawled black ink, Langley. The boy had a new school now, a new bus route, a neighbor who smiled too much and asked too few questions. He waved when spoken to. He answered politely. He wore his backpack like every other 10-year-old. The papers would eventually say he was placed through a temporary guardianship transfer. but none of them ever asked where the real Caleb Morgan went or if he ever existed. Because some stories don't start with birth. They start with belief. And belief, Caleb whispered one night in bed, is the easiest thing to fake. The past hides dark lies, but the truth always finds a way. If you stand for justice, truth, and courage, hit subscribe and join the channel. Together we rise. Disclaimer: the story you just watched is fictional. It explores themes of hidden trauma, deception, and the terrifying consequences of overlooked pasts. By unraveling a tale of identity fraud and dark secrets, it challenges our assumptions about safety, trust, and the systems meant to protect us. Its purpose is to raise awareness about psychological manipulation and provoke reflection on the unseen layers behind seemingly ordinary lives.